Ya la la. Thank you. La la la. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Good morning. Habits are formed through repetition. What? So these are the different habits and how long they take to become part of your routine. Drinking enough water every day requires 3 weeks. Waking up early, 21 days. Working out consistently, 2 months. Eating clean, 30 days. Reading daily, 3 weeks. Building discipline, 66 days. Controlling anger, 90 days. Quitting social media, 2 months. Boosting confidence, 45 days. None of these things happen simply. And they don't happen just because we decide that we're going to make the change in our lives. Nobody wakes up one morning and said, I'm going to be different than in fact they are. It takes practice. You have to do it over and over again. And eventually, once we have exerted the required effort, that behavior begins to feel natural. And I think the same thing is true of compassion. Compassion is a skill, and like any skill, it has to be practiced until it becomes a habit. That's why I love a specific point in this morning's parsha. It's referred to as Shiluach HaKan, the sending away of the mother bird. If you happen upon a bird's nest along the way, with its mother sitting over the fledglings or the eggs, you shall not take the mother together with her young. You shall surely send away the mother, and then you can take the eggs for yourself. It's a strange mitzvah, but it's one that is supposed to teach us that we must take care, even when we encounter a bird's nest. Perhaps because the Torah is teaching us something about ourselves. You come across a nest, you want to take something from it. You could, if you wanted to, take everything. The bird, the mother bird, the child, the egg. You have the capacity, you have the ability, because you're human, to be able to take whatever you want. You're that powerful. So the Torah says, stop. Notice. Restrain yourself. Leave something behind. Why? Because the Torah is teaching us that you have to practice seeing beyond yourself. You have to figure out that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that's where this beautiful teaching of the Sfat Emet comes in. Kishratzon legalot midat harachamim lemala mizmanim leish Yisrael kan tzipor kedei sheyit orer rachamim al yado. When an opportunity presents itself, you can look to heaven, says the Sfat Emet, and see the attribute of compassion. If you see a bird's nest, it's an opportunity for you to say to yourself, here is a moment where I can exercise my habit of compassion. The Sfat Emet doesn't say that God simply is telling us to be compassionate. He says that compassion happens in certain circumstances, and then it has to be practiced over and over again because it's not instinctive necessarily. Our instinct is to take whatever we can. Says the Sfat Emet, practice compassion. We often think of compassion as a personality trait. Some people are compassionate and some people aren't. Some people are naturally patient and some people are naturally generous and some people are filled with enormous empathy. But Judaism suggests something more helpful. Judaism says to us, maybe you're not necessarily born with those characteristics. Maybe not everybody has the ability from the start, but if you want that habit, you can practice it. Compassion can be learned. We can train ourselves to notice. We can train ourselves to pause. We can train ourselves to listen before we respond. We can train ourselves to imagine what another person might be experiencing. We can train ourselves to be gentle, even when we have the opportunity to be harsh. And the more we do it, says the Sfat Emet, the better we get at it. And it can become a reflexive impulse. The bird's nest is therefore not just a commandment about birds, it's a practice session. God gives us a small opportunity to exercise compassion so that when the larger opportunities present themselves, we'll know what to do. We'll instinctively respond properly. Because eventually the bird's nest becomes a person. The person who's struggling. The person who's lonely. The person who irritates us. The person who disagrees with us. The stranger. The person whose politics we can't understand. The person who's made a mistake. The person who needs something from us. And suddenly the question is no longer, am I a compassionate person? The question is, have I practiced compassion enough that I know how to respond? That's what makes this season of the year, as we approach the high holidays, such an appropriate time for this question. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur ask us to examine not only what we believe, but who are we becoming? And becoming a compassionate person doesn't happen because we stand here and make a resolution on a single day. We find ourselves cut off by somebody in traffic, and we choose not to be enraged. Someone says something with which we disagree. We pause before responding. Someone makes a mistake and we correct them without humiliating them. Someone needs help and we notice. Someone's hurting and instead of looking away, we look closer. The moments may seem insignificant, but they are opportunities for repetition. And the repetition becomes habit, and the habits become character. Last year, on the high holidays, I offered a different suggestion for what GHC stood for. You might remember I said it's not only for Greenberg Hebrew Center, but it's for goodness, humility, and compassion. So here we are almost a year later, and the high holidays are coming. And we have to ask ourselves the question, how did we do? Similar to Mayor Koch. We don't have to ask ourselves, were we compassionate in every moment? None of us were. But we have to ask ourselves the question, did we practice? Did we have opportunities for compassion and then take them? Did we pause before we reacted? Did we listen? Did we make room for someone else? Did we remember that person in front of us is carrying a story that we may not know? But perhaps because the goal this year isn't to become perfectly compassionate, maybe the goal for this year should be to practice compassion a little bit more. That's an important distinction. Because if we say to ourselves we have to become perfect, then we will have sacrificed the good. We don't need to wait until we feel compassionate to act compassionately. Sometimes the action comes first. We listen sometimes before we understand. We forgive before we feel ready. We help before we feel generous. We pause before we react. And somewhere in that practice, something changes inside us. The Torah places a bird's nest in our path and says, practice here. Practice noticing. Practice restraint. Practice caring about something other than yourself. Because tomorrow, there'll be another nest. And another. And another. Until compassion becomes less of an effort and more of a reflex. That, I think, is one of the greatest spiritual challenges of the high holidays. There's no way anyone is going to just show up on the high holidays, make a resolution to change, and then it'll just happen. We don't simply ask God to forgive the person we were. We ask God to help us become the person we want to be. Good, humble, compassionate. And then maybe we should add one more word. Practiced. Because compassion isn't something we either have or don't have. It's something we can practice. And every day, Judaism says there's going to be an opportunity placed before you. Another person, another encounter, another moment when we can choose to react or to respond or choose not to. Another nest along the road. We may notice it. We may stop. And we may practice. And may those small acts of compassion repeated again and again become the habits that shape who we are. Good and humble and compassionate. May that be who we are becoming. And may that be the kind of community we create together in the year ahead. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Musaf, page 184. Please rise.